Alright guys, welcome to chapters 15 and 16. Alright, so first we're going to talk about configuring a WAN. So an access point advertises each network that's available by broadcasting the SSID, the service set identifier. And then the controller connects to a VLAN, and that's how we separate the different SSIDs. So each combination of those two advertisements we consider a wireless LAN. So when we have a VLAN to go into the controller, and then the controller pushes out to the access point and advertises an SSID, that's our version of a wireless LAN. Alright, now Cisco controllers support a maximum of 512 wireless LANs, but only 16 of them can be actively configured on an access point. So each Cisco access point, especially in the enterprise series, will effectively allow 16 different SSIDs, different WANs. But the controllers can actually be set up for 512. Now, why you do that, I don't know. Maybe you want to rotate through some, or for security purposes, something like that. That'd be my only guess. All right, so obviously more wireless LANs equal bad. You know, each wireless LAN requires advertising, which requires airtime. So if I have a wireless access point and it has to broadcast, its message of hey, I got this service, this SSID, and I have this SSID, and I have this SSID. Each broadcast obviously requires airtime. So that's time that the clients are out there listening to stuff. That's time that you're broadcasting stuff. That's obviously uses power, obviously even a very small bit. So the more wireless LANs you have, obviously the more traffic you're going to have radio signals in the air. So each access point must broadcast beacons at regular intervals for each WAN, and those beacons are normally sent every 100 milliseconds at the lowest data rate. So again, you can see if I'm in a big organization and there are for some reason somebody set up 12 or 15 different wireless LANs or different SSIDs that are all being broadcast by one access point, that area is going to be heavily bombarded with different broadcasts. And then obviously that's bad. All right, so after that, your book kind of moves to another chapter and starts talking about authentication. And then your two options are radius and TACACS. And then obviously you need to know where in the GUI you can find those settings. So under the security tab on the left, then you click on radius, and then you can either do your authentication, things like that. Now, there's radius, and then there's, and I've always pronounced this TACACS plus. TACACS, I have always been told, or my opinion has always been, the original TACACS, not the plus, so just TACACS, was an old Linux standard or Unix standard. It was really designed more for hardware, to have different hardware pieces authenticate to each other, things like that. And then Cisco made a proprietary version called TACACS and just added the plus sign, so that became Cisco. Where radius is more for authenticating and proving you are who you say you are with clients and users, things like that. So you can see obviously both settings can be configured here under the security tab. So again, I click on security and then authentication. I can set the address where I want to send my authentications to. I can set what the password's going to be, that kind of stuff. Some other stuff. Same thing with TACACS. All right, and then your book starts talking about dynamic interfaces. So a dynamic interface is used to connect the controller and link it to a specific VLAN on the network. So I may say, hey, interface data 1 is going to be on VLAN 80. So remember, this is all logical stuff. These aren't physical interfaces. If you've had the firewall class, it's kind of the same thing. We have a bunch of logical interfaces, and even with a regular switch with VLANs, those are logical interfaces. You can't hold them in your hand, you can't point to them, but you can assign those to a physical port. So a dynamic interface is just a way to link a user-friendly name to a VLAN inside the controller. All right, and then if I click on the different interfaces, here you see, here I have the interface name, what port number I'm going to assign that logical interface to. So again, this is the logical interface, this is the physical interface, and then I can have all the information there. All right, so again, you can add as many wireless LANs, 512, but the access to the access point, but the APs typically will only support 16. So you can see here I have a whole bunch of different WANs. I have a whole bunch of different security policies. So each WAN can have its own separate policies and settings. You may have guest networks that don't have any security on them. You may have some networks that are for sales that don't require a whole lot of security, and then you may have research and development that may require a lot of security. So remember, each layer of security we adds extra time to the packet. Adds congestion. Depending on what I'm running, if I'm running triple DES, it gift wraps the packet 3 times and then sends it. Then the receiver has to unwrap it 3 times in order to unencrypt it. So that all adds extra time. All right, we already talked about that. All right, so quality of service. Each wireless LAN can have its own quality of service setting. And with Cisco in the wireless LAN controllers, they have 4 different settings for that. And they are platinum, gold, silver, bronze. So platinum obviously is the highest level of quality of service, and you should reserve that for voice. And then gold is reserved for typically for video, things like that. Silver is best effort, and bronze is anything that can run in the background. All the Facebooking people are doing, the job searching they're doing, that kind of stuff. All right, then your book starts talking about the guest network in Chapter 16. And more places are adding, free Wi-Fi. Actually, my kids go to Taekwondo in Hartville, and the Taekwondo place that they go to, the guy, he's got a business there, but he kind of does a part-time. He has a full-time job, and only several nights a week is he actually there. But he still has internet that he pays for because he needs to do stuff in his office and have internet and that kind of thing. But he never had a public guest network. So sometimes, between classes, like he'll have one class at 6 o'clock for younger kids, then one class at 7 o'clock for little older kids. So sometimes you have brothers and sisters that are a few years difference that need both different classes. So basically the younger kid has to stick around while the older kid takes a class. So what do you do with that younger kid? He's not going to sit in the chair for an hour and be good. So I had talked to him about, hey, could you share your wireless so we could, bring in, iPads, things like that, and we kind of occupy some of these kids' things. And he's like, well, I don't have no idea how to do that, and I don't want to pay for a consultant to do that. So I did it for him. So anyway, if your local Taekwondo place has public access, you can imagine how many other places have public access. So more and more companies are looking into this. Even McDonald's has like a web app, so it's just crazy the amount of technology that these companies are kind of incorporating. But I digress. So the guest network should be isolated from the regular network. And depending on the security of your network that you need more and more isolation. So by default, we set that up on a different controller port, and we set that up on a different VLAN through the switch. Now, at the local Taekwondo place, we just use a different port, and that's really kind of it. But some places, their security is so strenuous that it's actually wired completely different. It's separated on different switches, things like that. They use a separate access point. They use separate switches, and they connect to an optional port on their firewall so that network never touches their regular network. All right, so guest networks, again, are typically set up like any other VLAN. They need settings for quality of service and security. If it's sharing an access point with your production people, you don't want to allow the public users to have as much quality of service as the business users. You want to reserve that for the productive people that actually are generating revenue. All right, and they should be named to identify them as unprotected, something like unprotected Wi-Fi or public access unprotected, something like that, something to kind of hint that, hey, this is public, you can join it, but it's unprotected. In the business world, you really have to think about the things you do, and you have to plan for that lowest common denominator, that idiot person that's going to do something stupid and then blame you for it, like the lady that spilled coffee. So lady gets coffee, puts it between her legs, spills it on herself at McDonald's, and sues McDonald's. And she actually won the first suit. I think later on it was overturned. But still it cost McDonald's, a whole ton of money for defending that thing. So you want to make sure that no matter what, you make sure that the customer or the client knows and has no way of not knowing that access is unprotected. Otherwise, they come in, they say, oh, my identity got stolen while I was on your public Wi-Fi. I didn't know it was public, or I didn't know it was unprotected, blah, 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 blah. And then they sue you. And then again, even if they don't win, you still spend thousands and thousands of dollars on legal fees, and you don't want to mess with that. All right, so again, here's a typical corporate network with Wi-Fi. So we've got a bunch of different lightweight access points, and these access points are both pushing out the corporate network and the guest network. So again, we want to give the guest network, a smaller quality of service than the production network if they're on the same APs like that. and then it goes through the wireless LAN, and this would be, let's say, a layer 3 switch. So these would be like kind of like trunks to allow the multiple WLANs, and then the stuff would go out. But what's neat here, it also shows you that other than this layer 3, or actually this is the WAN controller, I'm sorry. So I go as a guest, I hit the access point, I hit the controller, and I'm on a separate port on the controller, and then I go through an isolated internet access where the corporate users actually go to my corporate internet and then the corporate network and that kind of stuff. So this is just another, again, an extreme case of, hey, I'm going to isolate the guest network. Now, most places that have guest networks, we're talking about Starbucks, McDonald's, things like that. They don't typically have a corporate network that also needs the wireless. So this stuff is kind of isolated already between wired and wireless. All right, so things to remember: guest networks should not transmit outside of the guest area. You don't want people pulling up in cars outside the parking lot and then accessing your guest network because then your cameras and stuff can't record them. All right, if you cover a waiting room, it should not transmit outside the building. And users should know they are connecting to an unprotected wireless network with a splash page. Almost every wireless device I had that was kind of designed for commercial use includes the option of a splash page. So not only should you have a name in there that says public Wi-Fi unprotected, but you should also kind of have a splash page that they have to click on to then again verify that it is a public unprotected network. So something like this. So here I'm at Pete's Coffee and Tea, and here's my complimentary Wi-Fi, and then here's the thing that they got to click on. So again, you're covered. So if this even tried to go to court, you wouldn't even have to pay for somebody to say, look, they were the name of the wireless was this, and then they had to click on this. They knew it was unprotected. For them to get blah blah, and you get thrown out. So here's another one for Holiday Inn. So again, these are just splash pages. And if you're in the Meraki system, you just click on wireless, and then there's an option for splash page, and you can obviously have your web guy make a splash page or do it yourself, whatever you want to do. All right, so that's about it. So again, chapter 15, just the stuff about not having a whole bunch of different wireless LANs. You don't want to be pushing them out like willy-nilly. And if you're going to authenticate, we typically use Radius for users, and if we're just doing equipment, then it's TACACS Plus. But if you're members, don't forget that TACACS Plus is a Cisco proprietary protocol. And for guest networks, obviously for chapter 16, you understand that you need to let them know that they're unprotected. If it needs to be isolated, you need to isolate it completely, things like that. So other than that, I think this week you guys are doing a quote for all the equipment to wire and everything for the second floor of the C building, and I think we're good. All right, guys, have a good one.